So this will be Memory Lane Perspective Part 4, adding colour, more colour, and trying to achieve brighter colours here and paler colours further away. First step would be to lift out the overpainting of the edges. Inevitable, since I had to try and paint a graduated wash in the sky. So by agitating the surface with a flat nylon brush and then pressing down, the colour should lift away, especially the blue is a good colour for lifting out. I'll just keep pressing down, lift away, take away there, and same idea along this edge in the distance. Lift out here, and we're to lift out this edge on the footpath here. Again, overpainting, but because there's a high quantity of ultramarine in the mix, and there was, that's easier to lift out. Good lifting colours. And lift this out. So lifting out into detail, I'm going to try and lift out on the car. I think that would mean going to a smaller nylon brush like this and zooming in and agitating the surface, lifting out. Lifting out. So a figure like this one, which is completely surrounded by grey, can be lifted out in detail by agitating the surface. Pram will probably be a dark colour anyway, so I'll just try and lift out the handrail and a little bit of legs. The longer the colour is left on, the harder it is to lift away, but that has come away to some degree. And the hood of the pram also lifting out. So what I'd like to try and do is paint the brick of the buildings and make that seem lighter further away and more intense nearer. So for a brick colour I would mix, start with yellow ochre and add crimson, add small quantities of crimson until I get a sort of brick red colour, quite a rich brick red that is. So on paper that looks like that's quite strong. And then in the palette I take some of that colour somewhere else in the palette and dilute it a bit further. So I've got two mixtures. I've got a paler mix, spilling things, which is that one. So I've got a lighter mix for further away and a darker mix for nearer. And for the further away area, so I'm trying to paint this to wet on wet to a degree. So I'm going to try and paint this carefully into the shapes around the windows, but also have a little bit more water in the mix so that the colour might blend. I'm going to leave that top edge out. So the most distant window, that's quite careful work. And if I can get it to tilt that way a little bit, tilt it to the left, then the colour might run a little more that way. So that's, have a little more water in the mix. Bring that down. So that has just loading the brush a little bit more so that the mixture is wetter. I'll just wet that a bit more around the edges there and tilt this that way. So I'm tilting the whole piece of paper this way so that the colour runs from here to the left. And if I carry on with that, I'm going to put a little drop of the darker mixture into the brick colour, just a little bit more, and try and make that colour, by reloading on the brush frequently, make the colour a little bit bolder or stronger as I come forwards. So now more colour. I'm going to switch to the larger brush and slightly more intense colour. Use the brush held upright, so I'm painting, so I'm getting that to run this way because it's still wet. Just tilt it up to the left and then pick up more a rich colour. A lot of watercolour painting is dependent on how frequently you dip back into the palette because that is recharging the brush. And so it's all about adding colour at this point. So that's a richer mixture. Again, just tilt this a little bit. Excuse me. Keep collecting from the palette. So quite a rich red ochre mixture on the nearest brickwork. It's a bit too far over. So I'm trying to complete that before the first areas have a chance to dry off. So I'm trying to keep it going in one go and let that be a little bit wetter at this end, at this left-hand end of the buildings. So the same idea would apply to the lower wall on the shops, the brick wall that's below the windows. But those will only be glimpsed partially behind figures and cars and bicycles. So there's a little glimpse of a bit of brick wall there. Again with a small brush. It's going to be a pillar there, a brick pillar, and possibly there, possibly there. So if I just focus on the area of lower wall that would be visible, not something visible through the car, but it would be fainter. And I haven't drawn detail there, but there should be a door going into these shops. So that's still pale brick colour. A little bit of wall perhaps there. To be a door there, and then a little bit of wall. There'll be wall here, and I suppose there, and down here. And this is all through leaving out, but gradually making the colour a little bit more intense. Coming forwards. A bit of brick wall there. I'm guessing there would be a door somewhere in there. Just a little bit of brick wall. Trying to get this a little more intense coming forwards. So the most vivid again would be the nearest bit of brick wall, which will be here. And then carefully painting to leave out this figure. To get the best from the brush, you keep it upright, keep it vertical. It's about there. So there might be a bit of brick visible here. And a little bit there. Also, just there. And something, not really clear on the structure of this, but there's got to be something here that's not door. Must be something else. And just behind these boxes. So this is where this is quite careful painting, and I suppose it's flat watercolour behind these. It's typical of watercolour to paint something behind in order to create something else, whichever is in front. And it would be quite difficult to do this by lifting out, and quite difficult also by masking fluid. So that is leaving out. So hopefully the buildings now are more intense, nearer, a little paler, further away. The footpath, I'm going to make an ochre grey, so yellow ochre predominantly, and a little bit of ultramarine, That makes a sort of dirty yellow ochre colour, which is a bit like raw sienna, raw umber. So on paper, that would look a bit like that. Let's make it a bit paler, and possibly a paler version, something like that. So the lighter version would be painted into the distant area of the footpath. And that obviously just applies to the areas that are behind figures. I'm going to paint over the edge of the curb. A little bit of distance there. So that's a relatively pale mixture in the distance. And then I'm going to go a little bit more intense here, slightly overloading the colour. overloading this colour with which has got ultramarine in it should possibly make it granulate a bit when it dries. So paint around the edge of this car and come forwards and little bit by bit. So there are little chapters here which are isolated by figures and objects like bicycles. So the bicycle, just painting into the negative shapes on the bicycle. Negative shapes. Gaps there. There's got to be some legs there. There. So that's quite wet, and that should help granulation in that area. Let's come forwards a little bit to this area of pavement right in front. Switch to a larger brush. See if I can make that granulate but also be a little more intense in colour. So yellow ochre plus ultramarine and more colour and more water. Something like that. It's just a little bit more colour present with that. It's not super tidy along here. So these are meant to be graduated washes, a wash that goes from paler to darker or paler to more intense. And that is quite wet, so it should help the illusion of texture through granulation. I just keep loading the brush, keep going back to the palette. Try and make that edge straight and pile on the colour solution. So if I hold that up, you can see that's quite wet, that surface. So the colour, in order to granulate, would have to be quite wet. So the whole image now, I'm hoping, has some addition of colour through perspective by being it's paler here, and darker here, and darker there. The far away houses, if you have that option of having put those in, I would make a little grey terracotta. So this is the terracotta colour, and add a tiny bit of ultramarine to that and more water. So not only is that colour paler, but it's also a bit duller with the addition of ultramarine. So it's something like that. It's a little bit of a grey ochre, grey terracotta rather, and I try and make it a bit greyer, a little bit more ultramarine in the mix. Paint that into the far buildings. Again, these were just an option. You don't have to have this here, but this is definitely a bit lighter and greyer than trying to paint those windows in. So the colour of these buildings, these houses, should be quite different to the nearer buildings, I think. Not so bright. So there's something like that there, and probably I added awnings in the distance. There must be the odd bit of a wall here somewhere. This is less precise because it is a long way off. Let's try and break up the symmetry of that. By suggesting either houses or shops, and possibly a grey This is ultramarine and a little bit yellow ochre, but it's mostly ultramarine making this mixture. And a little bit of water. Let's bring that right down. Yeah, I think leave that to dry. I might come back to that when it's dried off a bit, and possibly change those into houses. So far, then, painted the pavement, the houses, and the far buildings. We'd like to use some stronger colours on the awnings, and so those colours that are in the colour wheel, from yellow to red, any of these would count as warm colours, and so one of those would work well in the nearer part of the nearest awning, and what's opposite, whatever is opposite on this, might work in terms of contrast, since it's all theoretical. So the first blind I might paint would be a mixture of cadmium yellow and a little cadmium red to make cadmium orange, and that's going to be quite intense. So that's quite a strong orange red colour, quite a lot of colour there. If I try to put that in on the nearest awning, make it a little bit redder possibly. So that would be this awning here. I think, or maybe this one, maybe the very nearest one, so something like this here. I'd like to try and make that graduate again from vivid orange colour in front. Let's come right down to this edge. I'm just going to clean the brush and come back, and that's gone a slightly more dilute colour. Clean the brush again. Just clean the brush again. Get rid of the excess colour. I'm going to try and make that graduate up. Clean the brush again and dry it off. And try and make that colour go paler towards the top of the blind, so that looks like the blind has faded a little bit, coming higher up. So it's going from a darker colour lower down to more intense higher up. And I'm going to try and repeat that idea with the other colours in the other blinds in part 5.